Hello and welcome. I'm Savalian. I make videos about games, game development, and creativity, and today we're going to do an overview of how to use a Notion template that I made. I have a video coming with how to build it from scratch on your own, but it's going to be very long and I still have to edit it, and it's only going to be useful to people who actually want to build it from scratch. So this video is a shorter version of how I use this template, how it works, and with a little look at what the template looks like filled in with some real data. To begin, if you want to use the template, you'll have to buy it from my Ko-fi shop or build it yourself with the video I mentioned earlier. If you have purchased it, you should receive a link to the template, and if you click that link or go to that link, there is a duplicate button at the top of the page that will prompt you to log into Notion so you can make a copy of the template for your own Notion workspace. So I have a blank copy here, and all I've done so far is change the cover image and the icon color, mostly so I can be sure I'm on my copy and not the template itself. The way this template is organized is that there are two databases, one for tasks and one for timeframes. I made good use of the subpages feature in Notion, so the data of this template is actually much simpler than in my previous template, even though it's a lot more flexible. The timeframe objects in the timeframes database are essentially containers for tasks, and the way I like to plan is based on the 12-week year, so I focus on planning a quarter of the year at a time, and then I have weeks within those quarters. But like I mentioned, the timeframes are very flexible. You could do a year at the top level with individual months and then individual weeks within those. You could just do months and weeks. You could do this however you want. You could even plan individual timeframes for each day if that's how you want to do it. But I'm going to start by making a timeframe for the quarter. And then I'm going to demonstrate how this works by plugging in some of my goals from Q1, because I haven't actually planned out Q2 for myself yet. Now right at the top of the dashboard, the home page of the template, we have this gallery of time frames, and it's currently filtered so that only top level time frames show up, so no sub pages will show up here. So I'm going to click the plus button to add an object to this database. I'm going to scroll all the way down and choose the template in here for long time frame. I created this template to be used for like higher level time frames, whatever that means to you, and it has some information filled in to support adding sub time frames, seeing progress on tasks, and things like that. So I'm going to fill in the name, the icon, add a cover. These are just for fun, really, to make things look a little flashier. And then I'm going to set the time type to quarter. This is mostly used for filtering. And then to set the actual time frame for this time frame, we're going to use set date, not date. Date is a formula calculated from some things under the hood, and it's used in some automation that I'm going to show later. And if we show the hidden properties, we can see there are quite a few in here, but the ones that are shown by default near the top are the only ones that we really need to pay attention to as we're coming in here and editing things. The body of this template for the long time frame is meant to walk you through planning out just a longer period of time with presumably bigger goals or more goals. So at the top I have a little call out to plug in your aspirations for the quarter, for the month, or whatever. You can change the icon or the color of the call out if you want. Next I have a section labeled brainstorm, meant to be a place to journal out your thoughts, hash out some ideas. You don't have to use this if you don't want to, but I find this is always really useful for me when I'm planning out a new anything, honestly, is to just dump all of my thoughts onto paper, into a Notion page, and get it all out so I can properly think about it. The next section we have is top level goals. We can add some goals to this time frame here, so this will be our first look at what the tasks look like, the task database. And don't worry, we're going to come back to this template. We're not quite done with it yet. We're going to take a little detour and create a task. In here we have a lot more properties, but I'm going to scroll all the way down and select the template for supertask goal. This name is a little silly, but I wanted to show that this is meant for big goal-like tasks that probably contain other tasks within them. You could also call these like a project if you want. And the reason there's a template for this, and as you'll see, there's not a template for littler tasks, is that I prefer to use the properties on the database for tracking information as I go. And the page contents are really for things that can't be summed up numerically. So because this is going to be a bigger thing, like a project or a bigger goal, I have this template to manage all the nuance to that. So at the top of the template, we have another call out. Why is this goal important? I like to put stuff like this so that it gives me a little boost of motivation whenever I open this up and look at it. And just for this demonstration, I'm going to plug in my first goal for Q1, which was to work on the playable alpha of my game, which is currently called Project Caribou, just a working title. And I got a little ahead of myself selecting the template. There are a couple of things in the properties that I want to set first. The initiative is basically like a category to use for tasks and projects. I just like these for filtering, for seeing at a glance what kind of task that is. I have a few that I like to use that I'll plug in here, but the defaults that I put in the template are just work and home. The set date works just the same as with the time frames. You want to use the set date here if you're setting the date manually. Other fields are either used by automation or calculated. There are some checkboxes in here, is content and is work. These are optional and like a few things just used for filtering database views. Is work represents a task that is meant to earn money, so it shows up on the income tracking related database views. And then is content, as you might guess, represents a task that is a piece of content that will show up on the content calendar page. Now, item effort and item total are probably the two most important properties in here, and they are used to track the progress of your task. So total is going to be how much work total is required to finish this task, and then item effort is how much you've done. And I would recommend setting these values mostly at the subtask level, because you'll see as I get further into this, everything's going to roll up to the higher levels. But for example, like if you have something that's either done or not done, you just put 1 in the total, and then when you finish it, you put 1 in effort, and then you have 1 out of 1 is complete. If you have, say, a paper, you need to write 500 words. That's a really short paper, but you get my point. You would put 500 in the total, and then as you write it, maybe you write 100, you plug 100 into the effort, and then that will automatically calculate for the progress fields. What would that be, like 20%? Is that right? I think that's right. But that's how this works. So the total is the total number of things to do for that task. Effort is how many you've done. At some point, hopefully, you will have done all of them. Since this is a pretty big task, it's going to have a lot of subtasks, and they're going to have their own progress. I am going to leave this blank. Next, we have item income and item income goal. This is where you would set how much money a task has earned under item income, and then optionally you can set a goal for how much you'd like to earn or how much you plan to earn from that task. I don't have an income goal because this game is not going to be published soon. It's not published now. Well, hopefully soon, several months soon. But I'm going to add some other tasks to show how the income looks when you've actually got data in here. But the way I would use this is to make an overall goal to say like increase YouTube revenue or something. And on that I would track the total income and then maybe an income goal. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Next up is hours logged. And this is where you plug in how many hours you have worked on that task. And I like to keep track of this so that I know if I'm spending my time effectively. Just like everything else, if you plug in hours logged on a subtask, that will get rolled up into the total for its parent task and its parent's parent task all the way up to the top. And the last thing we have in here is a property to track metrics. This can be a content metric, a sales metric, honestly whatever you want. I left it very generic on purpose so that you can either rename it and use it for something specific, or you can just remove it if this isn't something that you want. But this is another property that will only get used to track sort of the results of what we're doing. Say you publish a YouTube video, you want to track views. That's the default label I put in here, was views. When you want to, you just come in here, you type in like 1,000 views or whatever you got on that video, and then it displays it on the relevant content cards so you can see your progress at a glance. That's all it's for. And that's everything up here in the properties that we want to set for a new task. So let's go back down to the template. And I will mention right here at the top of the template, we do have the time frame for this task in as a page section. Another relatively new Notion feature that I think is pretty cool. And this little gray bar represents the progress through the time frame. It's actually a property on the time frame that we're showing here. And since it's currently March 31st as I record this, it actually ticked over to midnight as I was recording, if you ever see April 1st on there. But since we're past Q1, it is at 100%. But as you make new time frames, this will increment correctly from 0% on the first day of the time frame to 100% on the last day. And I believe I have it tracking by hour, so it'll calculate it based on the hour. So it's a little tiny bit more granular than by the day. Now we have a few buttons here that we can use to generate tasks if we want. Buttons are a new Notion feature. It's really new, like I just got the email announcing it yesterday. And they let you automatically do a couple of different things. It's kind of limited right now. There are a lot of ways I would really like to see this improved in the future, but I found a couple of ways to make use of it. It just requires a little bit of manual work to set up. The coolest one, and I have a couple of variations of this kind of thing, is the Batch Create Subtasks button. Now, I've set this button up to create several tasks and offset them by an amount of time so that you can create a bunch of them. Say you want to make daily tasks, you can set it up so that it creates 5 and each one is a day later. And I have instructions in here for how to use the button. Basically, you need to click on the little cog icon next to the button and make some edits to the steps for it to work properly. So for this one, let's say I want to plug in the weekly jank tests that I did to find bugs in my game. I'll just make a few for now. And to do this, I'm going to go edit that button. By default, the button has just one step to create a page in the tasks database. I can adjust this to set the name, and then here's where it gets a little tricky. Since the button can't understand this idea of incrementing a date each time it steps, I've used some formulas and an idea that Thomas Frank shared in one of his videos, where instead of setting a date, we are setting an offset of a date and then calculating the date from that offset. So first we set the origin date, which is the starting point, and then we set the offset, which is the number of days or weeks or months it should be offset by, and then date offset type is what unit of measurement we're using for that. So if I want these to happen every week, starting at the very beginning of the year, I'll use January 1st as the origin date, set the offset type to weeks, and then I set the first one to 0. So we want that one to be on January 1st. It's not offset at all. And then I duplicate this step once for each additional task I want to create. And then on those tasks, I bump up that offset by the number of weeks that I want them to be offset by. So I'll do the very first one is 0, the next one is 1, the one after that is 2, and so on. If you wanted to do, say, one task every 4 days, you would set it to days first of all, and you would start at 0, you would do 4, you would do 8, you do 12. So simple math, it takes a little bit of thought, but once you get all these numbers plugged in, you can hit done, and then you can just press the button. It will run. There will be a little note, like a little toast pop up at the bottom. It will tell you if it was successful, how many things were changed or created, or whatever the button does. And then if we scroll down to the calendar, we can see all of these were created. They are back in January, so I'll click back a little bit. There are also other views available in this template, the subtask view and the subtask update. And I designed this so that subtask view shows an overview of the status of things, and then update contains all the properties you might want to update, so you have kind of a clean look at different things based on what you're trying to do. And I'm just going to set the initiative on all these tasks. I unfortunately couldn't find a clean way to roll this down from the parent without just overwriting the subtask initiatives, so I'm just setting them manually. And I'm going to leave the time frames empty for now so I can show you another automation that I have. But we're going to scroll over and set the item total to 1. The jank test is something that's just either done or not done. And it doesn't have an income goal or any income or anything, so I think we're done with this. I also want to show the scheduling view. This is more for tasks that you don't use the batch creation for, so I'm going to create a new task really quickly. This is the task for the weekly 5 hours of game work that I planned to do each week. There's a little toggle box below this view titled Scheduling View, and I was really happy I got this working. I'm so proud. If you expand this, you can see a monthly calendar with all your tasks on it. I'm going to go back to January, and you'll notice that the generated tasks don't show up here. That's because this view only works if we have this calendar show the set date. Since the generated tasks are using a generated date, they don't show up here, but that's okay. This is going to work beautifully for what we need. Because we are showing the date based on the set date, I can go up to this other view and I can drag a task from that database into the date on this other database, and it will update the set date for me. And you can give this a date range just by dragging the end of the little block here. So if you ever have a bunch of tasks here that you want to assign to dates and you don't want to type it in, you just want to click and drag, you can use the view in this little toggle box, close it up when you're done, and it just works. So we've created our quarterly time frame, we added this big goal to it and made some subtasks. Now let's go back to the quarterly template and finish looking through what's in there. Now we can see our goal is here in the goals gallery. There's also a table for making updates and a timeline, just a couple different ways to look at the information that's here. And next up we have a section called timeframes. And this is where we're going to create these smaller chunks of time contained in this larger chunk of time. So for me, the larger chunk of time is quarters, and then the smaller chunks are weeks. We have another automation button here. It works almost exactly the same way as the batch create tasks button. We have to go in and edit it, but then we can generate a bunch of weeks at one time. The only problem is that these Notion buttons have a limit of 10 steps, so I can't do 12 at once, so I'm going to do 2 sets of 6 instead. For the origin date, I'm actually picking January 2nd because, of course, weeks start on Monday. I've already got weeks set here as the type of time frame and the offset, but if you want to make days or months, you can make those changes in here. And then I'm going to duplicate this step 5 times for a total of 6 weeks. And I'm going to update that offset so it's 1 more for each one, going all the way down from 0 to 5. Then I hit done, I generate those weeks, I can see them show up right here. For the second batch, I can leave the origin date the same, and then just update the names, and then update the offset, and we're good to go. With just a couple minutes of editing this button automation, we have all 12 weeks for our 12-week year ready to be filled with tasks. Within the time frame page, we do have some other automations as well. I didn't use this first one, but it can be useful if you create your tasks outside this view, perhaps on the dashboard task list or something. And what this button does is it filters for all tasks at the top level within a certain date range, and then assigns them to the current page. So you will need to go into this button, edit it like you edited the other ones, and set the time frame to match this time frame. And you can do this by clicking into the filter section. It's a little bit harder to find. And there are 2 date checks here. You do need to change both of them for it to work properly. But what this is going to do is it's going to find any top level tasks, so anything without a parent object, and it's just going to assign it right in here. So you will want to make sure that you are in the correct time frame. You want to scoop all the top level tasks into this one that don't already have a time frame. So if you have already assigned one, say to a previous quarter or something, you don't have to worry about those getting reassigned. And because we already assigned the one task that we have, it says it ran successfully. It has not updated anything. Further down in this long time frame template, we have a section for writing down results, just a normal table, not a database, and I just included it in case you want to keep track of metrics related to your goals that maybe aren't right for a database property. And then finally we have a retrospective section. This is meant to do a little bit of writing about how the time frame went, how the quarter went, any lessons you learned, and take a moment to celebrate your wins. So that's the long time frame template. There's one more, the short time frame template. If we go back out to the dashboard, by the way, we will see only one of our 12 weeks shows up. That's because I have this page filtered so that only time frames that are in the future or that have ended in the past week will show up. And this is just so we don't clutter the dashboard with like every week we've ever added. So you can change this filter if you want, but I'm just gonna go manually to find week 1 to use that as our example. Now the short time frame template has a similar structure, but it's a little bit different. It's meant for time frames with a quick turnaround and where you're sort of doing the small daily work. So I think this is great for weeks, maybe months if you want your monthly planning to be a little bit more lightweight. In here we have a plan section for writing down a list of things you want to plan for or do or think about during the week. Next we get right into tasks with a weekly task list. And remember, we didn't assign any of our subtasks to a week because at the time the week timeframes hadn't been created, but I do have another button in here that works very similar to that long time frame button, but instead it looks for subtasks by default, and it does only assign tasks without a current time frame. So just like the other one, if you want to change this so that it finds all tasks at every level, you can do that as well. And you do need to go into this one just like the other one and update those filter dates to the week or the month or the day, whatever time frame this is. And when I run this, because I had those tasks without dates in week 1, I see that those tasks were updated. And this weekly calendar view, by the way, is another new Notion feature. They didn't have this when I made my other template, so I ended up using some formulas to sort of calculate the day of the week and use a kind of hacky board view to see a view just like this. So now it's basically effortless. I'm pretty happy. I love seeing my task like this all together on the week because it helps me sort of load balance. It helps me see which days I've maybe overcommitted on, and I can shift things around so I'm doing like an even amount of work each day. Next up in this template, we have a time frame log, basically just a space for rapid logging like you might do in a bullet journal. And then finally, we have another retrospective section to write about how the week went and just wrap everything up. The one bummer about the automation buttons is that they cannot apply a template to new items. So you actually have to go in and select the template for all the things that you've generated automatically. So I've just done that for each week in the time frame. And then I'm gonna speed through and just add a content based task real quick to show off some of the content and income features, and then we'll get into how the progress works and one last template. So I've made this goal for writing on Medium because I want to show this template that I've called the content piece template. This is a task template, and if I click this, you'll see it has spaces for writing the body of like a piece of content, a script, an outline, whatever you need. It has a space for links and resources, a space for metadata like description or tags, and then it has this nice button, Create Content Subtasks. This button is designed to generate subtasks for content that fits a common routine. So the one I have here is pretty simple. If you ever want to update it for your copy, you can go to the database, click the blue new button, but click on the little arrow, and then you can edit the template there. But basically what this button does is generate a write task, an edit task, and a publish task, and it schedules the dates based on these offsets that I've set here. So I've decided for this example, for the default values, I'm gonna have write on day 0, edits 3 days after that, and then publish 2 days after that. By default, this does generate tasks based on the current day. So it starts 0 would be today, depending on whenever you press the button, but you can change the origin date just like you can with the other buttons that are very similar to this one. I also have this little baby Kanban board in here to just see the status of your content tasks, but we can also go back to our week time frame and get these automatically added to the week using that button I showed you. And because we already edited the date filters for this button, we don't have to do anything. We just press it again and it works. In fact, it might be a good idea to edit all the buttons when you create the timeframes. Maybe remove the warning text to indicate that you've done it, and then you don't ever have to worry about it until you make new timeframes. Now let's see what happens as I update the item effort on the subtask, as I make progress and track that progress. First, let's say I've written the article. So I put 1 in item effort for the write task. I also have this handy button at the bottom of the dashboard that says Sync All Statuses. And what this button does is basically look at the progress for every task, and if it's above 0, it sets the task to doing, and then if it's at 100%, it sets the task to done. And I honestly just added this because I kept forgetting to update the statuses, but I always updated the progress. So that was how I worked. Now I have this nice handy button. I can just press it whenever and it will just work. And if we look at a higher level view of our tasks, we can see that the article task above that little subtask and the medium task as a whole have had their progress updated. I had some extra effort tracked that I didn't really want in there, but once I took it out, we can see that we had 3 subtasks, each with a total of 1. I marked down that 1 complete, and now we're at 33%, just as you would expect. If I update the effort of a second one so that it's also done, we can see it goes up to 66. So even if you have, tasks 2 or 3 levels down, the progress should bubble up to that highest level, making it very easy to see the overall progress of different things. Now I can also update the income for the content piece. I could do that at the middle task level here, and that will cascade up as well. Hours logged, same thing. I can set the hours for subtasks. I can add hours to mid-level tasks. I can just add them to the top, and all of that gets added up to the total all the way up to the top. For this actual article, I spent about 6 hours writing it, and I made not very much, 7 cents, but we can see in any view that shows the income, we can see at the top level for that medium writing goal, we see that 7 cents. I set a goal for the whole thing at $15, so we can see that as well. And it even calculates the hourly rate, which was a whopping 1 cent per hour. So I hope this demonstrates how the values you track for progress hours worked, income, all of these things just fold right up into those higher levels. I just think it's beautiful. I love this. So at the top of the dashboard, we just have this nice overview of everything that's going on. And the quarterly time frame gets totals from all the tasks and subtasks and subtasks that have been added to it. So with a little work up front, getting all this stuff initially set up, you really just have a nice automated system where you just have to update your progress. You just have to update, the hours you work, look up the money you made. You just plug in these little values and everything presents itself in this nice, like almost a report format. So that's my template. Like I said, this is available right now on my Ko-fi shop. I will include a link directly to it in the description. I do have an older template. It's still available because I wanted to make sure that anyone who purchased that one can still see it and access it. I didn't want to take it down. But if I can, I'll go in and mark it as old. But this one will be marked as the 2023 productivity template, and I'll link right to it. So hopefully nobody gets lost on the way there, because this one includes a lot more features that Notion has released in the past several months. Honestly, it's a lot more streamlined. I feel really good about this one. But that's the video. I hope it was fun. Thanks to anyone in advance who buys the template. I worked so hard on this to make it something special, and your support means so much to me. But I'm sure this short overview was probably like an hour long, so I'm going to wrap things up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you there. Thank you. Bye-bye.